Hello, and welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy. I'm your host, Jeremy Schumacher, licensed marriage and family therapist. To support the podcast, head over to patreon.com/wellnesswithjer. You can sign up for a membership. Benefits for the membership range from getting a shout out on podcast episode or YouTube video, all the way up to getting access to video episodes, ad-free episodes. We're going to work on some virtual meetups with guests from the podcast in the future. So head over to patreon.com/wellnesswithjer to support us. You can find a link to our merch store in the show notes, or you can like, subscribe, and share the podcast wherever it is that you're listening. We appreciate all the support and you taking the time to hang out with us and talk about mental health. Super stoked this week to be joined by the owner and operator at Lemon World Online, which is an awesome name that we'll nerd out about, I'm sure. Today, I am joined by Kit Weathers. Kit, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
We connected with religious trauma, and then I saw the name of your practice, and we connected a little bit about sad dad music right away as well.
Yes, I love sad dad music. I was very happy to hear that you do too.
So for those of you who don't know, Lemon World is a song by The National, which is a band I've seen. It's like my Dave Matthews band that you see like 8 times live. I think I've seen them live 6 times. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Kit, I always start with the same question. How'd you get into the mental health field?
Yeah. The answer to that is me search, as they say, which was like, let's find the answer to the question, what the fuck is wrong with me, basically. Dealt with like depression and anxiety for pretty much my whole young adult life and as far back as I can remember. And I was like, weird. Like nothing seems to be helping me with this. And then when I was in Christian college as an undergrad, I went to therapy and I had a really bad therapist the first time, which we can talk about how that was bad, but it's not really that important to this story. It was just really bad. And then was like, okay, maybe therapy sucks and that's not for me. And I had a professor that was like, oh, you should really try again, like get a different therapist. That one sounds bad. So I had really good therapists next. And I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. Like you're helping me figure out so many things and like deal with a lot of anxiety. And then fast forward, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years after I graduated, I was bartending for many years and just kind of like, maybe I should do something else with my life. I don't know. And the theme of like therapy was just kind of a constant in that period of my life. And also the theme of like, why isn't my depression getting better, even though I'm doing all this therapy and I'm taking antidepressants? And so I was like, that'd be good to figure out. Maybe I'll get a master's degree in it. I don't know. Why not? Sounds fun.
Sure.
So I solved the mystery, and it was mostly religious trauma and undiagnosed neurodivergence, and also I was queer.
Yeah, which, hard to do that healthily if you're in a high control religion sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you mind talking a little bit about the religious background that you're coming from?
Not at all. So I grew up in a very Pentecostal, like speak in tongues type church. And I'm pretty sure I was like dedicated as a baby. Like they did baby dedications in my church and just spent my entire youth from before I have memories at church, like heavily involved. My mom was a pastor and like was known as the church lady. Like all the kids in children's church were like, your mom's the church lady. I'm like, yep, that's my mom. She's the church lady. And my dad like ran the soundboard and stuff. We were there like several times a week. So very, very, very church heavy and like, super kind of strict upbringing in a lot of ways. But then weirdly, also my parents are really into like questioning things and like let me read pretty much whatever I wanted and always encouraged me to be curious and read and things like that. So that ended up being the downfall of my indoctrination. Go figure.
Sure. Yeah. Getting some input from outside sources tends to have that result. But you went to Christian college, you mentioned. So, like, where does that kind of fit in the timeline for questioning things, moving away from religion, understanding some of your own identity a little bit better? Was that during college, after college?
Yeah, I think during college is when I really started to deconstruct. And for me, my whole life, there had been this real like polarization between like, this is what I have to believe, and this is the only safe thing for me to believe. And like my true core self that was like, but I don't. I'm not connecting. I feel like I'm faking it when I'm raising my hands in worship. Like, I it doesn't make sense to me that this religion would be the correct one just because that's where I was born in the world. I'm like,
Mhm.
what about other people that are born in other places? Like, what if their religion's right and I'm going to go to some other hell that I don't even know about? Like, it just never made sense logically to me, even as a really small child. But the fear is like so motivating, I guess. And so I kind of always had this like polarization inside of me of like, okay, I either have to like be all in or I'm all out. And I would kind of bounce back and forth in my teenage and young adult years. And then I guess, let's see, I didn't go to college right away. I kind of like had a partying phase for a little bit and was just like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And then got like scared back into church, became a missionary for a year, and was super depressed the whole time I was on the mission field and like had to just have a smile and pretend that everything was great and I had the joy of the Lord. And the whole time I was just like, what's wrong with me? Like, why am I not enjoying this? Why do I not feel connected to any of this? Came home from that and I was like, I should go to college, I guess. I'm like 23. Um, and I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to study. I'm going to go to Christian college and I'm going to study theology and I'm going to figure out if I believe this or not, which is a really extreme thing to do. But hey, that's me. I'm kind of an extreme person sometimes.
Well, and I love this story. I love the story with one of the spoilers at the end already of that neurodivergence getting caught later.
Mhm.
Because I was diagnosed late in life with ADHD as well, and it's one of those things where not just did my diagnosis impact the way I looked at religion, but once I left religion, that changed a lot of how I related to my own diagnosis, just because I realized like so many things were neurodivergent and not, I don't know, not following the Bible closely enough or not believing strongly enough or whatever other sort of things I kind of soaked up. Or it's like, oh, right, you're just neurodivergent. That's different than
Yeah.
you don't get along with your church friends. Like, there's some layers here. It's not just one or the other. So
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
some of that like extreme black and white thinking while you're in the church, but then also in your own brain goes really well with what can happen for what I experience personally and what I see with a lot of my clients who are also late diagnosed neurodivergent. Like the church kind of preys on that black and white thinking.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because another thing that I've noticed about a lot of people that do end up leaving the church are often the ones who were the most invested or like bought in the most and really like took it to its limit and were like, actually, this isn't what I thought it was. And I really did everything and I really like went all the way in both feet and it's not what it says it is, which is the opposite of what people tell you
Yeah.
who are still in it. They're like, well, if you just believed more, if you just tried harder, if you read your Bible more. And I'm like, nope, I did all that. I
Yeah.
gave it.
Well, and almost like trying to convince yourself to stay for a lot of these people. There are people who serve on the boards, who volunteer, who do all this stuff. I have none of my religious trauma clients were half in and half out with church. They were all the way in for
Mhm.
all of their lives until things started to kind of fall apart on that. So, yeah,
Yeah.
weird propaganda, weird church propaganda that maybe doesn't
Yeah.
get talked about enough of like the people who leave are the ones who didn't fully believe in the first place or whatever.
Mhm. Yeah. And I know like I have a sibling who I'm pretty sure is neurotypical. And like I don't think he ever like went all full in like I did because I don't think he took everything so seriously. But I'm like, if you're telling me I'm going to go to hell, like I take that very seriously.
Yeah.
Like I'm taking this literally. probably maybe because of some of the neurodivergence. And like I don't think he has like the religious trauma that I have, because I don't think he ever like really bought in the same way that I did. And when he kind of just like never really was that engaged to begin with. So
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so interesting. I mean, then you start getting into attachment styles and birth order and some of all this stuff on on how within the same family dynamic those things
yeah,
can look a lot different.
yeah, totally.
Um, so you're a missionary for a year and you're miserable, and then you're like, "Hey, I should get my master's and figure out this therapy thing."
Well, first, then I got my bachelor's in the theology. I got a bachelor's in worship arts, so that was a very expensive piece of paper that like didn't do much for me. Um,
Sure.
but part of it was like, uh, well, I was really interested in music, and so I wanted to like learn music and learn about God. So I was like, worship arts, that sounds like a great degree for me. And I remember some of my experiences in that were like taking classes about how to design a worship service so as to basically emotionally manipulate people. That's not what they called it, but that's what I was seeing. I was like, oh, so that's why we do this in this order, and that's why we do the songs like this. And I just remember like starting to like look at things really critically. And then I was taking some classes about like preaching and kind of like translating original passages, and kind of realizing like, okay, like I'm reading this for myself now, and I am looking at what was actually written, and like looking at context and things like that that most Christians probably are never going to do. And just starting to be like, the things are not lining up. Like this just isn't, it's not what I thought it was. And it's definitely not what was given to me, or it's definitely not what our culture of mainstream Christianity culture is saying it is.
Yeah. Did you have the PK, the pastor's kid, trope kind of following you around as a kid of like you needed to be extra good because you were the pastor's kid, and or you were the rebellious because you were the pastor's kids, because those are the two extremes you see from pastor's kids?
Yeah, I was definitely like really obedient for most of my childhood. And I don't think my parents even had to like enforce that on me. It was, well, I mean, they definitely did when I was really young, but that was before my mom was a pastor. Um, and I think part of that was like being socialized as a girl too, and just like uh, being again like neurodivergent, and like having to manage myself in spaces to like appear normal, and always having to mask pretty early on. I was able to just put that into all contexts of my life and be like, yep, I know the rules. I will play the game really well. I'm super good. Don't worry about me. Not going to cause any trouble. And then when I was maybe in my later teens, it like flipped to the rebellious one, and I was like, cool, now I'm this. And I don't know what happened, like the flip switch, and I was like, yep, I don't want anything to do with like being a good girl anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so fascinating. It's all this extra, a lot of times I think unspoken pressure that society puts on, the church society specifically puts on people. Like both my parents, I don't have a pastor in my family. Both my parents were teachers at the high school, the Lutheran high school. I was raised Lutheran. And so like, right, like I was told explicitly, like you cannot go to those parties because when they get busted, that'll look bad for your dad if
Mhm.
you were drinking. And like just that extra layer of like, not only do I have to not do this stuff so I don't go to hell, but I also need to like protect my family's reputation.
Yeah, that was definitely implicit in my family. And I think my parents genuinely cared more about me, like my salvation, than how we looked, which
Sure.
is, I guess that's nice of them.
That's nice in a way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm curious because I late diagnosed ADHD. When did the diagnosis come into this kind of timeline that you're going through, and master's degree and that type of stuff? Was that, where does that fit
Yeah.
in?
Very conveniently, the last quarter of grad school.
Super
uh,
useful.
yeah, I was like, this would have been so great if I could have known this about myself earlier. Yeah, would have maybe gotten through school a lot easier. Um, I was always really good at school, And so not one of those ADHD kids who like suffers, because again, probably because of the obedience thing, I was like, if you tell me what to do, I can achieve a task. That's very good for me. So it wasn't until I started seeing clients in my internship and started like seeing neurodivergent clients, because as you've said on your podcast before, like we attract each other, right? And so I was attracting all these neurodivergent clients, and I was like, I relate to all of this stuff. And then my partner at the time was also like, I think I have ADHD. And so we both got diagnosed at the same time, like within the same month. And it was pretty wild. And then like looking back, when you're like, oh wow, okay, let me make sense of things that I've experienced, you're like, oh yeah, I've always had this. But actually, um this one of the ways that I realized I had it was I took Ritalin, and like for funsies, like at a
Hmm.
at a party, and everyone else was having fun, and I was like, I just feel very productive, like I could get my whole to-do list done right now. I don't know what you're experiencing, but that's not what I'm experiencing. And then people were like, maybe you have ADHD, and I was like, huh, maybe.
Yeah. I love that. Everyone's partying and you're like, I'm going to go respond to these emails that I've been putting off for 2 weeks.
Yeah. And so that was like several years before I went to grad school, but I kind of just was like, I'm not interested in learning if that's true or not at the time. But then later, when I started to think again, maybe I'm neurodivergent, I was like, I did have that experience with Ritalin before. So worth looking into.
Yeah, I made sense of that. I don't know that I've told this story before, so hooray for a new story on the podcast. In high school, my best friend, his two older sisters, drove the Red Bull truck around. So, like back in the day when Red Bull was a new thing, still, they would do promotions in like big cities, and people would drive this Red Bull vehicle around and hand out free samples. So at the end of their shift, they'd just bring whatever they didn't give away home. So like dumbass 16-year-old boys in the basement playing Xbox, we would just drink like a case of Red Bull in a night. And like my friends would be like bouncing off the wall and like hyper. And I'd be like, I'm super chill. I could like sleep. Like I'm very calm and mellow. And like later on, I was like, yeah, I think I like did something to my brain because I had too many energy drinks when I was young. And it was like, oh no, just a stimulant mellows you right out. That's all that
Yeah.
is. So yes, I have my Red Bull right now while we're recording. It's 6:30, almost 7 o'clock where I am. Like, that's normal for
You'll
me.
go right to sleep. Don't worry.
Yeah. Um, so when you're in grad school, attracting some neurodivergent folks that you're working with,
Mhm.
when does the religious trauma piece kind of fit in for you? Was that something after you were in the field? You're like, I want to go and learn more about this, or these are the people I want to work with. Was that something you were able to explore while you were in grad school, or you were exposed to at all?
So kind of the opposite. I applied to grad school around the same time I was really deconstructing. Well, my deconstruction took like, gosh, I don't know, years. It takes years for everyone, right? But it was kind of at the time that I was like consciously deconstructing and consciously saying like I don't believe in God anymore, and like telling my family members that I don't believe in God anymore, cuz I had been like quiet quitting for a while, you know? And then my mom would say things like, I don't know, if I like was dating someone new, she'd be like, "Does he love the Lord?" And I'd be like, no. So I was like, I should probably tell my parents that that's not really a conversation that I want to keep having with them. Um, so around that time, I had come across the term religious trauma online, probably on Twitter. I don't remember exactly where, but as soon as I came across it, I was like, oh, I need to know everything about this, and started reading a bunch of books. I like ordered Marlene Winnell's book, and I'd ordered Jamie Lee Finch's book when she finished it, and was like following all the religious trauma hashtags and like getting as much information as I could about it right before I started grad school. So then when I started grad school, I was very annoying in every single class. I was the one like bringing it up because it was my special interest at the time, and it wasn't really in the curriculum at all. No one mentioned religious trauma outside of me until um, I was almost done with the program, one of my professors mentioned it, and I was like, yes, it's getting talked about. Finally, it's here. But the whole time I was the one that would be like raising my hand, like, okay, so what about in religious context? How does this, just like poking holes in things and like bringing it up and talking about how in a lot of the theories, spirituality and religious community is considered a positive thing. So it's considered like a support for our clients, kind of unquestioningly. So I was always the one that was like, I question that. I don't think that's necessarily a support. I think people need to make sure that that is supportive if it is. And if it's not, it's not. And actually it can be really harmful. And let me tell you how. And bringing up like when we would learn about like child abuse, I'd be like, so how is telling children about hell not child abuse? And I just feel like everyone in my class, like no one actually like outwardly got annoyed, but I was like, am I starting to annoy everybody by bringing this up all the time and no one else seems to care? And then eventually kind of mid to end of grad school, I was able to do some research on it for a research class. And I had a classmate who was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was a thing you could research, and like teamed up with me about it. So it's kind of been, part of that came into my journey at the same time as therapy did. So that's been part of it for the whole time. And I'm still mad that it's not like a diagnosable thing,
Yeah, I mean, you're geographically in a different location than I am. I'm in the Midwest, so I can't imagine a grad program where it would come up.
Mhm.
I've been in the field for a bit longer too, so grad school's further removed for me. But yeah, I'm the only person who does it in the state of Wisconsin right now. So like, I think being on either of the coasts is a little bit of a different vibe. And religion is maybe has a stranglehold on kind of like the cultural zeitgeist at the current moment. Because I did my grad school at a Jesuit school, so like that wasn't coming up at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was kind of surprised how little it came up though, because I'm in Seattle. This is very, pretty liberal city, not a lot of religious influence in the city compared to the rest of our country, but still it wasn't a thing that was really addressed ever. I did sex therapy, so even in my sex therapy program, it hardly ever came up, and I was like, purity culture, everybody, purity culture, and people were like, oh yeah, that's a thing. And I'm like, yeah, it is a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely want to talk about purity culture. The one other thing you said, just that I want to highlight, because I think it's really interesting, both for people in the field and out of the field, when we talk about religion kind of getting a pass as a support, like that's almost always in qualitative data where clients are listing what they think is good in their life. And we
Hmm.
don't have a ton of quantifiable data that says this is good for this percentage of people, or that like people report this is helpful in these ways. It's just like you said, kind of given a pass. I would say like it's a privileged status in our country still to be religious. And so saying I go to church and that's good is kind of unquestioned, where might be, well, do you have these adverse religious experiences of being kicked out of a social group within a church, or being ostracized, being afraid of hell, like all these things that might be doing harm for a good little Christian who still goes every weekend and says, yeah, I go to church and it's good for me. And
Yeah.
so it's hard to tease that out because it's privileged. So we just kind of go, oh, spirituality, that's good for you, check, and move on without really
Mhm.
digging in too often.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of ways that it can be really positive. Like I know even when I look back at my life and how much harm it did, there was also a lot of positive there. Like there was times when my family was really supported by the church when we were going through like a hard financial time, or when my parents were going through stuff, and people were there for us. So even as an institution that has done me a lot of harm, I'm like, I can see why many people would count it as a positive thing, especially for the community aspect of it.
Yeah, and that's consistently, I would say, the thing I hear the most with my clients, and also the thing I see the most in literature, is the community aspect of it is nice because it's so built in.
Yeah.
You don't have to make friends. Everyone's your friend if you go to church with them. Like, you don't need to ask for help. Church will gather things for you. You just had a baby. We've got a line of people who are waiting to bring you food, etc. So
Yeah.
like it's really a well-structured community more than it's doing anything particularly unique or like providing a different community than could be found elsewhere. It's just structured and ingrained, people don't have to do a ton of work to maintain it.
Yeah, that's actually something I've been thinking about recently is a theme that comes up in a lot of my work as a therapist, whether it's with religious trauma clients or not, is like making friends as an adult is hard. Like being in community as an adult is hard. Everybody is working. Capitalism is taking up all of our time and everyone's stressed out and we're all scattered in different parts of the city. And it's just really difficult to like have that intentional community sometimes. So actually, a few friends and I started a thing that we're jokingly calling anti-church, but we're kind of like, okay, what are the elements of church that are actually good? Even down to like, what's good about prayer requests? Well, what's cool about it is that you're telling everybody that you have a need, and then people are hearing that and they're going, oh, actually, I can meet that need. Or they're going, oh, I can at least like think about you and maybe I have a connection. Or if not, like, I can at least check in on you and see if you're doing okay. Like that's a really positive thing. And it's framed as like, we're going to pray for you in a church context, but you can take that same idea out of prayer and use it in just a community context and be like, so here's what I'm going through. And then you're supported.
Yeah.
Or there were some other things that we came up with that we were like, okay, this is cool. This is how we can like secularize church a little bit and make it work for us.
Yeah, and I love that. There's a couple of groups. I'm drawing the blank on the big one. That's basically like a secular church, but like I've given a couple talks to the local free thinker groups, and like that again, like that's an easy way for people to build community. I'm involved in atheopaganism, which is like a non-theistic paganism, and like man, there's a lot of religious trauma in that group. But same with free thinkers. Like you know, you go to a Unitarian church, like those people are so stoked to hear where you grew up in church, what you left, why you left, and like have you, because again, that setting and that community is still really wonderful for people. And we're social creatures. We're wired for all of that. So it is beneficial if we can take out the toxic theology and the spiritual bypassing and some of that other stuff. It's really, the community is really good for people.
Yeah. Even like the aspect of music and like singing together is really good for nervous system regulation. So like with my little group, we'll do karaoke. We'll like do like YouTube karaoke together and get that aspect. And then we'll maybe like teach each other things or do a little yoga or do something that like is, you know, has that element of like we're either going to learn or like turn inwards in some way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Self-reflection. I mean, the ritual aspects of church, as you mentioned earlier, with like worship structure, are heavily ritualized because our brains are very susceptible to ritual. High-level athletes are some of the most superstitious people you'll ever meet. They have their pregame rituals. They have all that stuff. Religion is heavily ritualized because our brains ascribe meaning to those things. And so we like to know what's coming. We like to know what to expect, and we like to experience it with other people. So yeah, I've seen lots of memes about, you know, I thought I liked Jesus, but it's really I just like music because I felt the same thing when I went to this concert that was secular. Like,
yes,
right,
exactly.
that's your nervous system regulating itself with other people. So yeah, let's talk purity culture. I know that's one of the things you focus on in your practice. I'm curious. I'm curious about your experience with it, but also, I guess, specifically advertising, working with the queer community, lived experience, identifying as queer yourself. Like, how does that specifically then interplay with a lot of the harms above and beyond what everyone else is experiencing with purity culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think in all the ways that you would expect and imagine. But something that's been really interesting to me, which is like, I don't know if this directly answers your question, but maybe we'll get there, is that in church in general, there's just this lack of consent. And so I think that purity culture and rape culture are two sides of the same coin, basically. And a big part of that is like not setting anyone up for successful like consent scenarios. And so when you think about how that happens just in the church in general, like people will lay hands on you and pray for you without asking, or yeah, like people telling testimonies, like getting up in front of the church and trauma dumping on everybody, and you're like, I didn't consent to hear that. That's like super traumatic. Now I have that in my brain. And there's just a lot of, yeah, there's a lot of like both in the community and in the cultural aspects, but also in even the teachings and the structures of it that's just non-consensual. And I think that also obviously trickles down into the purity culture stuff because there's no teaching on consent whatsoever. The closest they come is the whole like just don't do sex part. Just if you just say no to sex until you're married. But that doesn't teach you anything about really consent. That just teaches you like here's the rule, someone else made it and you must follow it, which is the exact opposite of autonomy and having personal power and being able to actually give enthusiastic consent. And so that's a really big thing that's been in my brain lately with religious trauma in general is like we all need to know more about consent, not just in a sexual context, but in any context.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, just a lack of bodily autonomy, right? Like your body
Mhm.
is sinful, your body is broken, it's not to be trusted. And the reason church attracts so many abusers is because the blame is often put on the victim. And so it's one of those things where I think what you're saying, like purity culture and rape culture, are two sides of the same coin, because the rigidness and the strictness of purity culture leads to a total lack of knowledge and a power imbalance for people who know more than kids who haven't been educated on it. They don't
Yeah,
know how to say no. They're told don't have sex, but not given any explanation of what that looks like, how to have conversations around it, any of that stuff. And any topic, at least the way I was raised, which is very fundamentalist, like the word was dirty before you were
yeah,
married. Like the topic itself, you shouldn't think about it or talk about it because then you might start lusting spontaneously. And how
yeah,
bad would that be? So like it creates this lack of knowledge. And when there's a lack of knowledge, there's a lack of power. And so this power imbalance exists then for would-be predators, for people who want to take advantage of that power imbalance.
yeah. Yeah, and then you see the same like you the whole like, well, she shouldn't have been wearing that skirt if she didn't want to be raped in church with like, oh, well, don't wear a spaghetti strap because you don't want to cause a man to stumble. Like that was placed on my shoulders and many other like people raised as girls' shoulders from the time they were like prepubescent. Like, oh, don't wear a crop top, you're gonna cause a man to stumble. What the fuck? Like, what do you mean? Like my 8-year-old shoulder is going to cause a man to do what exactly? And like the word stumble is like just vague enough that you're like, do you mean go to hell or do you mean like rape me? Not sure, not clear what that means exactly.
Yeah, and it's so fucked up because it's gonna be a whole soapbox. Because it takes autonomy away from both people, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So then we're teaching females that they need to be responsible for other people's behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And we're taking away men's autonomy to take care of themselves because they can't help it,
Mm-hmm.
supposedly, within that purity culture structure. So again, like this is where abuse happens, and this is where I think even people who wait till they are married. When I was a good Christian, I started my career still as a Christian, doing
Mm-hmm.
marriage therapy as a Christian. So many people having bad sex because
Mm-hmm.
like they didn't know anything about sex. Like just because they're married and it's okay all of a sudden doesn't mean they know how to talk about consent. They talk about turn-ons or turn-offs. They know what foreplay is looks like. And the Bible's super still patriarchal and unhelpful with anything else. So now sex is allowable, but you shouldn't say no to each other unless you're praying. Like that's really the only verse in the Bible that says anything about like frequency, intensity, anything
Yeah.
related to that. Like, so people just have no idea. And then it's just supposed to be like, guess you have babies and everything's awesome. Like, that's
Yeah.
still a huge lack of knowledge.
Okay. Two things in what you said that I want to follow up on. One of them being, yeah, I think a lot of the emphasis about purity culture is on the way that it affects women. And obviously it does. But you mentioned like even taking autonomy away from men. And something I see like with my clients who are dealing with purity culture as grown men are like, I feel dangerous, is this thought. Like, I feel like I'm not to be trusted because that's what I was taught. And so like having trouble like initiating with their partners because they don't want to feel like a creep or a predator. That's something that can happen. And then the other part you were saying about like, okay, yeah, once you get married, you're just supposed to suddenly like know about sex and be able to have sex. But if every single time you've ever thought about sex as a teenager, there was a feeling of shame immediately because it was like, oh, God knows that I'm thinking about this and that's dirty and bad, you can't just turn that off. So then when you're married and you're supposed to like want to have sex, there's this feeling of shame around it for a lot of people. And they're like, how do I turn off the shame? Like it's fine now, right? But no, that's ingrained now. That's like a response that your brain is having now because that's what you've been taught. And you can't just undo that like without, you can eventually undo that, but it takes work and it takes unlearning. So yeah. And then it specifically with like how queerness comes into that for a lot of people is if that's the worst thing you can be in a lot of these cultures, then you're going to hide it from yourself. You're going to stuff it down real deep. And so especially like for me, I'm pansexual. And so I'm like bisexual basically. And so I would just lean into the part of me that was attracted to men. And I'm like, that's the only part I'm going to pay attention to. And so that's why it took until I was in my 30s to be like, oh, actually, no, I've always actually been really attracted to people of all genders. I just wasn't allowed to be. But a lot of people will find themselves like in a marriage, in a straight marriage, and then suddenly realize like, oh, actually, I don't like this at all. In fact, maybe I'm gay because they weren't allowed to explore that because that wasn't allowed to be an option. And now they're having sex that they hate. And they're like, things aren't making sense. It's not adding up. So the harm is just measurable.
I think systemically, obviously, looking at purity culture and like the legislation and the systemic changes that are specifically singling out the trans community right now, but it's if they get away with that, it will go back to the gay community in general, which is kind of what I grew up in, growing up in the 90s, the satanic panic and then the gay panic. And so it's one of those things where like the church has wanted to pick on this. Like I heard zero sermons around rape is a topic the Bible talks about. Not that it rules it out or says it's bad, but it's in there. But I heard plenty of sermons about being gay. I heard plenty of sermons about, this thing that was affecting a minority of people at that time. And I'm in Wisconsin. We didn't have sermons on getting drunk, even though that's probably 90% of the congregation is dealing with a hangover. But like, we're going to really ostracize and pick on this marginalized community. And so I think like, that's what I see a lot with the queer community is just that like deep feeling of unsafeness. Like church is where I was supposed to feel safe and I wasn't feeling safe there. If anything, I was more threatened there than anywhere else. And so it's fascinating working with people who are deconstructing because like when you establish safety, then all this stuff starts to then fall into place. Potentially, it's not like a domino effect for everyone, but I think people start to finally be like, oh, I'm safe in my body. What is my body telling me? And right, it might be that I'm attracted to more than one gender, or it might be that the gender that I was given at birth isn't what aligns with who I am. Like these things, they take safety first to be able to fully explore them. And the church always kind of was like, oh, well, this person leaves the church and they go have all this sex because they're like heathens now. And it's like, no, they're like safe to finally explore and experience their body in a way. It's not that they're so excited to sin. It's that they finally feel safe and can listen to their body in a totally different way than you can when you're growing up in the confines of something like purity culture.
Yeah. 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 We never heard sermons about how about hoarding wealth either, and how it's harder for what's the eye of the needle verse. I can't find the words, but you know what I'm talking about.
I do know what you're talking about. Yeah, harder for a rich man to make it to heaven than a camel pass through the eye of a needle.
Yeah, why was that never preached about? I wonder.
I think because I don't know what church you went to growing up, but mine was pretty fancy. I was confirmed in a like brand new church building, so I don't think I could talk about wealth being bad in their multi-million-dollar building.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's pick on the gays instead.
Yeah. 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 And it's so, I mean, I've talked about this on a couple different episodes, but like it's such a weird cultural time to be in mental health and be seeing queer clients, because it's so awesome to see social acceptance, community building, things online, these communities in real life and online. And then also have like this very aggressive political campaign to take away rights and demonize people. Like it's very paradoxical, I think, for a lot of people. It's deeply unsettling to be like, I have this really great friend group who are totally accepting and awesome. And also, like, we have to get everyone out to vote so that we can exist. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
it's very, I don't know if that's your experience on the West Coast, but that's the experience in the Midwest right now. It's like very, on the one hand, this is awesome time to be alive. On the other hand, like, holy shit, this is really scary.
Yeah, I do think it's become a lot more polarized in that way, where people are having both ends of that experience. Um, and even in Seattle, where it's like, it's pretty safe to exist as a queer person here, but I see a lot of trans clients who are still like so scared to come out, even to themselves or in certain contexts, or aren't sure if it's safe for them to go outside wearing the clothes they want to wear, even in a city that is like known for being more safe for that specifically. It's still really, really scary for people. And something that I have done in the last year is I've started doing group therapy specifically for trans clients, because I kept having all these trans clients in all my sessions, and I was like, I just wish you all could meet, because you're all talking about the same stuff, and you're all talking about how you don't have enough trans friends, and I just want you all to get in the same room and talk to each other. So I was like, you know what, why don't I do that? And I did, and it's been really, really rewarding and really successful, and it's super cool. Like the ones who are still my clients will tell me like, oh yeah, we have a Discord chat, we still hang out sometimes, and I'm like, oh, that makes me so happy. But yeah, it still comes up all the time in our sessions where they're like, I'm scared, I can't travel to see my family in another state without feeling scared, or just, yeah, the who's going to be the next president, is that going to be safe for us? And also, I mean, not to get too into politics. In fact, we'll just not get too into politics. I don't want
We can,
to.
because, well, and I think, because I want to talk about this too. You on your website talk about, or maybe it's the Facebook group, I don't remember which. I saw it, practicing from an anti-oppression lens,
Yeah.
and I've been on that kick and working on like examining my stuff to like decolonize my practice as best I can. It's one of those things where, right, as therapists, we're taught to like not get political, to not share our stance, not do some of these things. But like just earlier today, I was on a Facebook group for therapists, and someone asked for like a group for porn addiction. So I went
Mhm.
over to ASEC's website and copied their stance on porn addiction and pasted it to be like, yeah, that's not like a psychological concept. So groups that are treating it are probably doing harm. Like, I
Mhm.
do think that the fields could be better about saying like, hey, this is where the science and the understanding is at. Like, we understand that, you know, these political movements are harming people. They're raising the rates of suicide among marginalized communities. Like, I do
Mhm.
think it's good to highlight those things, even if that means not every Republican wants to work with us, that we're putting some of that stuff out there so that people who need to have allies and need to feel safe are finding that.
Yeah, my school was very social justice focused, so they weren't as emphasizing on the like, you have to be neutral stance. They were like, obviously you need to be accepting of people who don't believe the same as you, but you don't need to be accepting of harm, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I mean, it's tough. Like, I have my certification in religious trauma. Like, it's hard to not deal with politics as cult mind control on in
Hmm.
some capacity right now, which is often how I talk about it when it comes up, of just like, well, this is what a cult does, and here's what one of our political parties is doing.
Hmm.
Not that I'm a huge fan of the other political party, but like,
Yeah,
maybe we should have
kind of both are doing that. Just one's a little softer. One has a heart emoji at the end.
one would hope we have more than two political parties at some point. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think it's interesting, and the reason I want to talk about it from an anti-oppression lens too is like, being a missionary is one of
Mm-hmm.
those things that I went on a mission trip when I was in college. Like, it's one of those things that I look back and just like really cringe about
Yeah.
because just like that lack of awareness, because it's literally colonialism. Like that's just this, we're just teaching 18, 19-year-olds to like go out and colonize this third world country for
Oh,
us with our Christianity.
God, yeah, it's so bad. And when I think about like my time as a missionary too, I do also wonder like maybe that's part of why I felt so depressed when I was doing that. And maybe that was my body being like, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel right. I don't know if this is right. And me just trying to stuff that down and be like, no, I have to do it. You
Yeah,
know, maybe that
yeah,
was my body all along.
yeah, I got really sick on mine, so I would love to say that, but I'm pretty sure it was just food poisoning. Um, let's take a hard left turn because I want to
Okay.
talk about this too.
Yeah,
You named your practice after a song by The National.
I did. Yes. Okay.
Talk about the inspiration and the thought process there.
First of all, just like naming things is so hard. I don't know how anyone, you have children, you had to name a human. I don't know how anyone does that. Like every time I like get a cat or like have a band or anything that I have to name, it's such a stressful experience. And so uh yeah, at the end of the day I was like, I don't care. It's got to just mean something to me, I guess. And I liked the fact that it was a national reference and I'm like, okay, this is a filter. I'm going to know who recognizes it and who doesn't is like doesn't really mean anything, but it's a little piece of connection. But also just the whole like I like the idea of like um even the word lemon world. It's like, yeah, look around us. Like there's a lot of shit that sucks right now. And can this be a place within that where things don't have to suck? Is kind of part of the meaning behind it as well. But sad dad rock, yes. That got me through a lot of depression years. And the National sure does know how to write about depression and anxiety in a really
Yeah,
beautiful way.
yeah. Like I alluded to earlier, it's one of the bands. I think it's the band I've probably seen the most live.
Mhm.
It helps that my wife also really likes them, so we go together. But yeah, I mean, I think about Lemon World, Fake Empire, Terrible
Mhm.
Love. I mean, all of High Violet,
Oh, yeah.
the whole album.
Yes.
So yeah, I wanted to put you on the spot. I know in getting you to agree to be on the podcast, I said it's not investigative journalism, but I was like, I'm gonna ask, what are your top three national albums? I'm gonna make you rank them.
Oh, no. Okay. I'm having that experience where someone's like, what's your favorite anything? And then you're like, I've actually never listened to music in my life. I don't know what
None of
you're
them.
talking about.
Okay, that's fine. I won't put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. I would
Um,
say I'm also really bad at remembering the names of things, but I would say
sure.
the High Violet album is probably definitely in top three. And then what was the one after that that came out in like 2013? What was
Trouble
that?
will find me.
Yeah, that one's really good. I like that one too.
Yeah,
Um,
awesome.
and then but I really like Alligator and Boxer too. I don't know.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, this is why I wanted to have this conversation. Boxer is on everybody's list, and I've had it on. I have a record player in my office,
Uh-huh.
which is a little secret tip to therapists out there. You flip the record, that's halfway point of your session. It's like a
Oh,
little nice way to let your client know, like we're halfway done. The music stops. You start wrapping up.
I love that.
It's a really nice trick. You just have to be aware if you have like an album that's really short, that
Yeah.
throws things off. Um, yeah, I had Boxer on the rotation recently, and it was kind of like there are a couple songs that I love on that
Mhm.
album, like
Mhm.
Fake Empire's on that, and Slow Show's on that, which is like
I love Slow
awesome.
Show.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's so good live too. But yeah, like Alligator is in my top three. Like I would say
Hmm.
Trouble Will Find Me is my favorite because there's zero bad songs on that album. But
Yeah.
Alligators, I play that a lot.
Hmm.
Mr. November, Looking for Astronauts, Secret
Yes.
Meeting. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
that was in there. They weren't famous yet. And a lot of like the anxiety and angst of the relationship that the songwriter was going through is coming through a lot. Like a lot of good, legit mental health stuff gets covered on that album.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And Mr. November, if you want a song that has a lot of swears in it and is really cool to see live, that's
Yes.
a good one.
Yes. I love it.
So we talked off recording, but you had a cat named Vanderlyle,
Yes.
and I have
Yeah.
a child. I have a child whose name is Xander, which is a different reference, but his middle name is Lyle. Trying to
Yeah.
get that national reference in. So,
I loved.
which is the song they usually end their live shows with, which is
Mhm.
Vanderlyle Crybaby Geeks.
Yeah. Yeah. When I got my cat, I was driving her home and she was crying. She was a little kitten and she was just crying the whole way home. And I started singing, Vanderlyle, cry, baby, cry. And then I was like, oh, that's her name. That's what she's called now. And so, yeah, she's not my cat anymore. I had a bunch of roommates at the time, and a different roommate has her now. She's alive and well, but not mine.
Yeah. That was like a lullaby we sang to both our boys because it's one of those songs we knew all the words to.
Yeah.
I was never a fan of like children's lullabies; they're all kind of trash,
Yeah.
or about like death in some sort of
Yeah, they're
horrific way.
creepy or annoying, either way.
So I sang like classic rock songs or alternative rock songs because those are the songs I knew the words to. So
Yeah, that works.
Kit, one other thing I want to talk about real quick. We'll we'll get to like your plugs and where people can find you.
Mhm.
But one of the things that you're doing online that I think is super awesome, awesome way for therapists to give back to the community is you're offering like some free workshops and you're doing some
Mhm.
stuff for people, Facebook or Instagram Live. I don't remember where I saw it, but like doing some trainings, doing some things on just kind of like one-off topics. I think you have one coming up that's on how to talk to people who are still believers.
Yeah.
So I love that stuff. I'm always looking for resources to share with my clients so they can see like,
Mhm.
hey, there are other people who struggle with this. There are other people who are going through this stuff. So what was kind of like the idea with that? Was that to meet a need, or was that something that you're just like, I'm vibing on this topic and I want to talk about it?
A little bit of both. So I think I so part of my neurodivergence is pattern recognition comes really easily to me. So I'll start to notice like, oh, interesting, this is coming up for a lot of my clients. And then I'm like having a similar conversation with a bunch of people over and over again. This is clearly a topic that's like important to me right now and important to my clients right now. And so I'll kind of want to like put together my thoughts about it. And then I'm like, people should be able to access this if it's helpful for them. And then um yeah, I'm putting together right now my coaching program. So part of the struggle with being a therapist, at least with the LMFT license, is you can't see people out of state unless you're licensed in all 50 states, which would be ridiculous. So part of wanting to be more accessible with some of the like religious trauma recovery stuff is coaching doesn't have the same oversight as therapy. So I'm putting together kind of like a course slash group coaching thing, and just in doing all of that mental work and figuring out what I want to be in that, I'm digging up all this material, and then I'm like, cool, well, this is both a way for me to process my thoughts, get used to teaching, and like give people free information, and also like tell people that I exist if they're interested in being coached. So it's kind of a win-win on 4 different levels.
Yeah. Yeah, I relate very strongly to like the verbal processing aspect of it, of like,
Mhm.
I'll have these ideas in my head that are rolling around and they come out great in session with clients. And then it's like a different thing if I'm on YouTube or I'm giving a talk to be like, oh
Mm.
yeah, I gotta like talk it out first so it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, with that in mind, where do people go to find your work if they want to work with you, if they want to connect, if they want to follow you on social media? What do you got? Where do they find you?
Yeah, lemonworld.online is pretty much everything. So that's my website, lemonworld.online. That's my Instagram handle. My Facebook group is called De-Indoctrinated. So that's a private group where I post these trainings and where people can have conversations about what they're learning and, talk about their de-indoctrination journeys. I really, a lot of people use the word deconstruction, but I've been clinging to the word de-indoctrination as I'm going through, like, what is it? Like, that we are deconstructing. A lot of what we're deconstructing is the indoctrination and all of these harmful beliefs. So that's what I'm calling it. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Yeah, I love that. I talk about deconversion a lot because I
Mm-hmm.
think deconstruction is like that theoretical
Mm-hmm.
theology thinking, and I wanted a different word for like how much stuff is ingrained or like stuck in your system still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and the language we use for this like helps people relate to it differently. So yes,
Yeah.
I love that. We will have all those links and helpful forwards and all those sites on the show notes, so they're easy to find. And yeah, we'll definitely plug future workshops and stuff on our socials too, so people can get in touch with them. I love that stuff for people to be able to get access to and build their community
Yeah.
as they're going through their own de-indoctrination.
Yes. Yeah. You see a lot of like memes and like helpful little infographics, but I guess I wanted to give a little more long form training for some of that stuff. So that's kind of another piece of why I'm doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the community is super helpful. I've
Mhm.
said this before, but like people seem to deconvert in cohorts. Like
Uh,
every couple of years, there's like a big startup of deconversion podcasts, and then they'll kind of wind down because it stops
mhm.
being, I don't want to say so important, but like they move on to other stuff. And
Yeah.
so I think it's helpful to connect. I tell almost all my religious trauma clients, like, go online, find a Facebook group to join, because like they're out there, they're great, like build your community. That's such
Mhm.
a necessary first step. So
Yeah.
awesome stuff, Kit. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
And to all our wonderful listeners out there, thanks for tuning in once again. We'll be back next week with another new episode. Take care, everyone.